So we're up to module 4 of the term. We're third of the way there, and which is kind of frightening. And this week we are talking about networks and what that means for collaboration and alliance building. And what we'll be doing in the first part of the workshop is mapping out an example network, and this is in the context of fire safety. Blighton has particular problems, like much of rural Australia, when fire season hits, and we want to try and figure out where the different agencies sit in relation to each other. And we want to pick up on two important concepts from the reading this week. One is the idea of brokerage, which is a key position in any network where you have the power to broker arrangements between other parts of the network. And we'll often find that through accident or design, organizational networks of organizations will have people who act at that brokerage point. And sometimes it's by design, sometimes it's an organization that's set up with the specific aim of being a broker. But sometimes, particularly in small towns, that brokerage could be completely accidental. It can just be the fact that someone from these three organisations all play on the same cricket team, or all go and drink at the same pub every Friday night, or whatever. But there can be informal reasons how these brokerage networks get created. And this is an important concept to think about when you're looking at making plans and alliances, because these can be really useful sources of connection when they work, but they can also be really undermining, because you can find that there are other networks of information and brokerage that are happening outside your control and outside what you know about. And that can be very, very much undermining for someone who's trying to form these alliances, when you find that, well, these guys all know each other and they're basically all sitting and gossiping in the corner, and they're not kind of contributing to the large project. There's been some really interesting work just tangentially in terms of mapping student relationships in a particular course, and looking at where communications occur between different students and what sort of patterns exist. That stuff's really interesting. I suspect in this course it's going to be a very, very simple little set of networks and connections. But when you get large courses and when people are all sort of engaged, you end up with these really interesting kind of beautiful looking spider web maps of who talks to who talks to the staff members. Sometimes you get these little spin-off groups where one person will talk to a group that don't talk to anyone else. Well, you could have you form the same sort of maps of any sort of social context, including agency cooperation. The other thing from the reading that I want to, the other thing's useful, is the concept of homophily. I am guessing how that's pronounced. Homophily. And that is the notion that like organizations will cluster together, and organizations with similar cultures, outlooks, responsibilities, or whatever will tend to gravitate towards each other. So in our particular field, you'll find things like law enforcement will tend to gravitate towards other law enforcement official sort of organizations. Social work, welfare organizations will tend to drift in their own direction. And again, that's something really important to keep track of when you're trying to arrange these connections between groups. That sometimes it's bad news to put the social workers in with the police, because their perspectives are going to be so different. But sometimes it's a really good idea to do that, because sometimes you need both sides to be challenged by the experience of other people. So there's no easy answer to that. It's just a case of being conscious. All right, so we'll just be doing an example on a whiteboard, new whiteboard. Just sort of using Blighton as an example of this. This may be a model that we can refer back to later as events transpire. And this is, there's no absolute correct answer to any of this. We are just trying to show how these maps can be built.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yep.
The Blighton that's in the challenges in the study guide, is that also the town that we use in our simulation? Okay.
And some of the decisions you make in the workshops will influence to some extent the narrative.
Okay, cool. Because I thought so, and then I was confused and
So, and like in the first week, we talked about the reason why it was in such dire straits. I can't remember what we decided then, actually. I think we decided that there was economic growth, but local people were being cut out of it.
I'll go back to my week one notes.
Because that's not directly important for any of the decision points in the sim, but it does help us understand things that occur. Gives us some context.
Was this, because again, I'm still getting two classes mixed up in my mind, but was this the one where I suggested we get tradesmen from out of town to come into town, offering them little incentives?
No, that might have been the other subject.
That was the other subject.
There was something in this one about it. Yeah, was it about like sort of diverting crime and having the skills training and stuff done?
That was the other subject as well.
Was it? Because I thought it was this one.
That was Cryptid Lakes. I deliberately chose a different title for that place because I knew it would become even more confusing. That was the scenario we built for the first assignment in that subject.
I'm looking at this subject, module 2.
No,
teach juveniles trades whilst restoring the rundown buildings and machinery. Also teach them pride in themselves, their work in their town. So that's this town.
Okay, so we did it in both. We did it in both units. Okay. All right. So yeah, it all interconnects and intersects.
Awesome.
And yeah, the fire issue is going to come back to haunt us later in the term, or at least some of the groups. All right. So the first group that's on our list, let me just title this so it looks
sounds like a good title of a song, you know.
you can write a soundtrack for the sim for extra credit. So probably we're going to put, at least to start with, in the middle of our map, the government sponsored fire service, the standard sort of city run fire service that's, has a manager and staff who are employed by the by the town council, state government, whoever, but they're like an official organization. But in contrast to that, what we have, and it's certainly an issue in Victoria, is the volunteer. Now, they tend to have a slightly different jurisdiction to the Central Fire Service. The Central Fire Service tends to be in the municipal area, and the volunteer fire brigades tend to exist in the outer outer country areas like the CFA. But their relationship does tend to overlap. So we have a relationship there. And that's often a fairly strained relationship. There's a perception from the volunteers that the main fire service is better resourced, better, better treated than they are. There's often a sensation, belief from the central services that these guys are unregulated and inconsistent in the way they approach. So I've put it down as one set, but you're probably going to end up with multiple branches. Maybe I can just put different branches off of this just to give you the idea of different jurisdictions and different areas that are all going to have their own beliefs and possibly even a different set of relationships and with the volunteer with the central organization. The State Emergency Service is another organizational group. Let's put them over here. Again, and one of the big problems we've got is the difference between volunteers and professional organizations. And this is becoming an increasing issue in a lot of the service areas, particularly unemployment, health services, criminal justice even. We're relying more and more on volunteers and volunteer organizations and divesting a lot of state responsibility for things. So in the criminology field, we might have like a volunteer group who look after homeless kids. We might have another volunteer group that provides mentors and, big brothers and big sisters for homeless kids. We've also got the state government, health and community services that have formal responsibility for it. So you're always going to have these tensions, and where they work, where it works best. I'm working on having less hair. Tell you what, there's less of it every year. All right. So we saw a really interesting thing. I don't think don't know if it extended up into the northern states. We had a very interesting, weird set of clashes between the CFA, the Country Fire Authorities, the volunteers, and the Melbourne Central Fire Authority. I don't remember what it's called, the Metropolitan Fire Service or something like that, where the government phased in a whole series of health and safety safeguards for firefighters. And they did it to the Metro Fire Service, and then they basically by pen stroke rolled it out to the CFAs as well. And the CFAs were really, really unhappy. As someone who didn't dig very deep into the issue, it seemed fairly strange to me that someone would say we don't like having safer and better environments to work in. But I suspect it was this perception. Not sure if we have CFA up here. We have rural and volunteers. Yeah, it's probably called different things in different states. But yeah, our CFA, and it was a big issue in the election before the pandemic hit us, where they really saw this as government overreach, that they didn't want these fancy health and safety standards. They objected to it, and they objected to those being introduced. And it got quite acrimonious and quite vicious. And as I said, I was kind of puzzled by it because I would have thought everyone wanted a safer workplace, but I suspect maybe they saw it being too much administration, too onerous, Maybe they like being on fire. Who knows?
Maybe there were a few policies and procedures that came with it that they didn't want to follow.
Yeah, and costs. You know, there could be costs as well. So yeah, you can have a situation where another party, like the centralized government, has to deal with these different organizations, and they themselves can get significant backlash from it. Another issue that pops up from time to time is the volunteer services. I know this happens in fire. Not sure about other services, but I suspect it can be an influence, is where you have people with hero syndrome. And I know in the area that I live, there was a volunteer fire person who started a fire in the middle of the Black Saturday fires. And unfortunately, the guy ended up killing himself because the fire got out of control. But it didn't help the relationships between the so-called professional firefighters in the metropolitan service and the perception that these kind of people with psychological issues are joining the volunteer services and putting everyone else into danger. Now, there could be just as many professional firefighters with that sort of hero complex problems. But again, it was one of those issues that was difficult to manage, because as soon as no one wanted to accuse the CFA of doing the wrong thing, because they already have a chip on their shoulder. And also, as volunteers, there's only so much you can, you know, if you start making life too hard for the volunteers, you just won't have volunteers anymore. However, this can be a significant problem, and this can be a source of tension. So there's all sorts of issues that put these divides in place. And when we're looking at the upcoming issues in Blighton, the question of who you put in charge becomes a really big issue. Where, you know, and even if you do like a jurisdiction thing where you say these guys, you know, have jurisdiction in the city, these have jurisdictions in each of their local areas, you've got heaps of borderline issues. You've got issues where the water is going to be taken from a reservoir that's in one area and taken to another area, or taken into the city. So you can't really just split up the jurisdictions and leave that to be the end of the story. You all have your piece of the pie, and you know, you stick to your own territory. We'll chuck in some other. Got the Blighton Police. Police often act as a first point of call for things that could turn into other emergency services. We've got, as we already talked about last week, if we were putting someone at the middle of this map, we, you know, might be more likely to put the 000 service there, because they do end up very much as the nexus.
Does 000 then call in the SES? Because I feel like we have a separate number for the SES.
They've just set up a separate line for police as well. Or at least they have here, for things that are non-urgent. So there are
like Police Link.
Yeah, I don't know what it's. We just have on police cars now. Call 000 for help. If it's not urgent, call 447-5943 or something. I think because of the over demand on the 000 service. So I'm not sure what non-urgent things people are calling police for and who gets to decide what that is. But I guess if you say, I'm coming home and my house has been broken into, the police might say that's non-urgent because you're not currently at risk, and we'll send someone around in a few days to see you, as opposed to, someone's in my house right now. I suspect individuals are not going to necessarily see that distinction, though. If you come home and your house has been broken into, you're not going to go, oh, well, it's not really urgent.
Is that something that's only like recently being done in Victoria?
Mm.
There you go. Queensland wasn't 20 years behind everywhere else for a change. We've had Police Link, yeah, ever, since ever. And yeah, you've got a different number for SES as well. And yeah, it literally one of the examples that they have, like back when I used to watch actual TV, would be that. It would be if someone is actively in your house, 000. If they've been and gone, it was this other phone number. And then obviously living where I do in Cairns and having so many break-in attempts, I feel like I just use like an online form. Like it's so easy. They just give me a buzz whenever if they want to come fingerprint. They're actually really fast for that stuff, like the forensic stuff. But yeah, it's really relaxed. And I'm so surprised to hear that other states were behind us on that. But maybe it's just because of, I guess, the size of the state and how spread out we are potentially in some areas. They had to do it sooner.
I think that's probably right. The other thing that drives that, I think, is the AMBOs, because there's a lot of elderly people who use the ambulance to get around to various things. And I know, again, the AMBOs are constantly on the verge of going on strike or whatever. But there's a lot of elderly people who, if they've got an appointment, they'll ring the ambulance or ring 000 to get the ambulance to take them out to a doctor's appointment. And then the ambulance waits while they have the appointment, and then they might get them to drive them back to the shops on the way home, and they might do their shopping. And AMBOs spend a lot of time sitting and waiting for people.
We have Blue Care here to do that. But I was going to say our hospital now, because a lot of people were turning up to emergency department that could probably just go to the GP. So the hospital now has like if it's any of these, ring this number. If it's any of these, ring this number. If it's any of these, yes, come see us at emergency. So we now have that. And then they've also opened a Medicare clinic. So if you can't get into your normal GP and it's bad, but not bad enough for the hospital, you can go to this Medicare clinic.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's a few because Cairns has done the same thing. It's like an urgent care. And so there's a few people that are a little bit, and myself included, apprehensive about what that means for the future of, access to healthcare. But they've also got a GP service at the public hospital and private hospital. So, say for example, had a sibling tear a tendon and, very, very painful, but not going to die. And there were people, after car accidents that were getting wheeled in. So they actually booked in for an appointment at the hospital for like 8 a.m. the next morning and then just boosted themselves up with all the paracetamol in the world and then made it to the appointment. And you know what? Like it's not good, but it worked, like it was really interesting. But I know I've heard like down the coast, like a little bit further south, they haven't had that support. So they've had like overrun GPs, the hospital's not coping. They don't even have the ambulances to be able to use them for emergencies, let alone taxis. And yeah, it's a bit wild. But yeah, Cairns is faring pretty well on that side of things. So I'm glad to hear Townsville is too.
Oh, we're still overrun. Like my boyfriend is here on a visa. He's trying to get his residency. So he can only go to the hospital or the doctor connected to his healthcare that he has to pay for on his visa. So, he doesn't have Medicare, he doesn't have pension cards, any of that. So he only has the option of the hospital or the doctor that is connected to his healthcare card. I mean, his private healthcare card. And I'm just like, oh, I never think about these things. I was born and raised in Australia. I just do this.
The shortage of doctors is also going to impact on that. Like some regions have severe shortages of GPs, and there's GP areas where even in urban areas where GPs are just saying, no, we're not taking any more clients on. So yeah, this information role, I mean, we're talking about that brokerage role. And when we talk about brokerage, we're really thinking about more formal, like top level policy brokerage. But your 000 service has a really immediate brokerage role in just trying to get sorted the right people out to the right situation. And I think one of the like I look, I'm definitely against police shooting mentally ill people. I'll say that at the beginning. I don't think it's a good idea. But I think one of the challenges of coming up with a better solution is how do you actually implement some different procedures when someone's having a mental health incident, and who do you get involved and how do they get involved?
Here in Townsville,
Wasn't
we've
that
got
the
a
whole
mental health ambulance. It's
Okay.
not widely known. It's not widely known, but we do have one.
That's good to know considering how many people there are in Townsville. But yeah,
I'm
isn't
gonna
that the
say how many
whole
people
like
in Townsville
notion
with
behind defund
severe
the
mental health
police?
problems.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's just gonna end up the new version of the short bus, those sorts of stories. But yeah, wasn't that like the whole thing about defunding the police was to have like less enforcement and more support in those sorts of things. And then yeah, I don't know, they chose a terrible name for it because it's very abrasive, I guess. But
Mm.
um yeah, I mean, I'm also against, the police shooting mentally ill people, but the public are dumb. Like we are so stupid when we're in environments that we're not routine and familiar with. So like I feel like having police officers there to do some kind of crowd control and harm minimization to other people around someone who's mentally ill, I can definitely see a lot of benefit in that side of things as well. So, yes.
Yeah,
Wasn't this the community police officers? Is that what they're called?
I only can think of the liaison officers, but that's for Indigenous,
Okay.
the yellow on the uniform.
Yeah. I thought there was another, like, I could be imagining things.
and I guess yeah,
Wishful thinking.
these are all examples of situations where you've got like the actual solution to the problem is like just the first stage, and actually having people who are strategic thinkers who can actually figure out, well, how is it actually going to work is really important. And often you get these half-baked things rolled out, and then a year later everyone says, oh, that doesn't work because no one never used the service. I was like, well, how did they get in contact with them? How did they know about it? And that's the same with a lot of services. Um, so we can, when we're starting to sort of set up these different agencies, we've got another sort of little cluster over here. We're talking about the homophily or homophily area. You've got the town council. Oh, that's not the word town.
Your keyboard has a mind of its own again.
Yeah. The mayor's task force.
I was about to say, God, these sound like the boring guys, and then I realized I'm administration, so
This is the challenge of making this stuff interesting, is that it is the boring guys which make the world work, or often it's the boring guys that stop the world working because they hand it over. I mean, this is why human resources are generally a bad idea in any organization, because they do all the boring stuff, but then they become gatekeepers, and then they hold everyone else to ransom over whether they will actually make the system work.
like
Um,
that the lady from Monsters Inc. I might be showing my age here, filthy millennial. But like Monsters Inc., the big slug lady, and she's like always watching and trying to get the paperwork. That's me, guys. Like it's over for you. I run this show.
And we're gonna all come in and undermine everything you do.
okay, I'm only going to put a few of these connections in.
Yeah, I'm only using the one screen. I know I sound so spoiled, so I've been a bit lost on this whiteboard, but if it's all right with you, can I save it and have a look at it later? Like, is there a way to do that, or can you only save it?
Um, I don't know if you can save it. I'll definitely save it and upload it
Okay, thank you.
at the end of the session. But we've got this little cluster of like political groups around here. We've got the mayor and the idea of this task force being, it's really cute the way it's making the all the connections move as well. That's really nice. Um, being one of those brokerage points. They're actually setting up a specific task force whose job it is to get others to talk to each other and not to create bottlenecks. So
Would
sometimes
the fire commission fall under the task force?
what have I said about the
My notes are it's a waste of money, but it's an
Yeah.
expensive state
Oh,
public
yes.
body.
I think it's a state one. Yeah.
Right, so not the mayor. Okay. It's a
But
state coming in, making sure that they look good.
yeah. So this is probably set up by the state government. It's over here somewhere. And it again is going to probably have a link into there. And then it's going to want to challenge the mayor's task force for that brokerage position. And you're actually going to get dueling brokerages going on. Because they've got different sort of political outcomes and they're responding to different political masters. And if you have, like, you know, a different political philosophy, conservative versus more conservative, you know, like, unlike you have anyone radical in politics, but you've got two different types of conservative governments at the town level and state level, those kinds of fractures can play out in the agencies that they have moving into these bodies and these organizations. So we could go on. I mean, there's heaps of other things to put in there. There's the local corporation has a manufacturing plant, which is laying pipe for some future plots that are going to pop up involving that corporation. The motorcycle clubs and the Sons of the Southern Cross, again, these guys are going to be floating around and are going to appear in different story arcs in different ways. But we've got a whole lot of different organizations and this need to try and figure out, where does someone contact, who facilitates the communication, and who facilitates the deals, and who mediates when things break down, as they often do. And yeah, and Stephanie, you're saying the fire commission's a massive waste of time and money, and often they are. I mean, do you guys remember the big report on the vulnerability of students to sexual assault and sexual abuse on campus last year? It came out, might have been this time last year. There was an interim report of a body that basically found that levels of sexual assault and sexual abuse of students is at an all-time high. Really distressing. You know, sexual harassment all the way through to actual sexual assault on campus. Really distressing, urgent action needed. The Council of Australian Vice Chancellors has declared that they are going to, in the future, create a committee to look into it. And here we are almost 12 months later, no committee, no action, no movement.
Is that why we have, because I did the O week classes, and there was a snippet of a video of people explaining no means no, coercion means no, all that sort of stuff. Would that be from that?
Could be. And that's, I think, what the response has been, or not even to individual organizations, I think individual people. So I think someone in the group, Student Services, who managed O Week, probably thought it was a good idea to put something in there, and they just did that on their own initiative.
But also, side question, are the acts themselves increased, or have just more people started reporting? Because this was actually something we talked about in Crim Intelligence last term.
I was going to say that's a very criminologist question to ask. We don't know. And until the VC's fact-finding committee actually gets formed and actually does something, maybe we won't know. But I think it's an example of how something which seems pretty urgent to me, which seems like something, if I was being paid $1.5 million a year to be a VC, would jump to the top of my queue, doesn't seem to have impacted on them.
When you're saying VC, are you meaning Vice Chancellor of? $1.5 million.
Some of them.
Oh, damn. Well, I'm going to hit him up to pay some of my mortgage because I can't afford these student fees. And my entire cost of my unit is less than a tenth of their wage. Um, so I just want to confirm. So one, yeah, I saw that same thing on orientation and I kind of sniggered at it. And then I was like, oh, hang on, like I've grown up in Cairns, like local campus, I've probably got a quite mainstream set of values, yada yada. There's probably some students that would potentially have to learn these things. I don't know, whatever. Went along with it. And then, yeah, I remember little bits and pieces about the assaults and that sort of stuff. And I was like, yeah, but like you said, Steph, I was like, how many of them are getting reported? I remember doing in Emma's class like hate crime reporting. So I'm going like a gender and sort of that skew on it. But talking about it now, is there a reflection or any sort of accountability that these commissions and committees actually have to fulfilling the promises and stuff and the findings that they make? Because as far as I can see on all of the commissions that we've had to look at so far in criminology, a lot of them take so long to adopt what the recommendations are, if at all. Does that then become some kind of KPI that can be held to or anything like that?
It,
Not that I agree with KPIs at all. I think I hate my life sometimes because of them working in customer service, but yeah, is there any sort of accountability?
commissions are really interesting creatures, because they're actually, often we look at royal commissions and things and they look like a court, but they're not a court at all. They're actually an administrative body, and what they are kind of big fact-finding missions, and they have the responsibility to, they have like terms of reference that say you are to go out and find out this information within this time period and report back to government. And there are pros and cons of this as an approach. One of the cons is they can only make recommendations. They have no power to actually change things. But because of that, they actually have really sweeping powers. And there's no right to privilege against self-incrimination in front of a commission. So you can actually drag people in and force them to answer questions under threat of perjury or contempt to do that. And the one that I was involved in was EARC, which was post Fitzgerald. Years ago, before you were born, I'm sure. And one of our teams was looking at the costs of justice, and they were trying to find out how much it costs to hire a judge for a year. And of course, the judicial officers just went, we don't have to answer it, it's to you. And they said, aha, contempt power. If you don't, we're going to throw your judge in jail for contempt. So they got in and they forced judges to answer everything that they were being paid for, how much their chairs cost, which is more than you think, even if you think it'd be outrageous. And it was I thought, for me, it was a really interesting example of if you had any other body, everyone just clams up. So they need that really strong power to be able to basically put people to the torture to find out information, and and have the threat of perjury, if punishment for perjury if they lie. But the downside of it all is they can't then, if they find out something that's wrong, actually implement change. It then has to go back to government. And as I think one of you guys mentioned earlier, if the government's hasn't got the will, if the government's changed, if the government only set up the commission in order to try and get rid of the problem for a few years, then there's very little that the commissioners can do. So commissions are a fairly interesting thing. Australia's the only place that tends to run them like a courtroom. In the UK, they just run like out of an office somewhere, and you just get called in and told if you don't come in to answer questions, you're going to get punished for contempt. But they tend to be a little more effective than the Australian ones. So
Okay, because yeah, it seems almost like if they did have those powers, they wouldn't be a commission. It would be more like old school, like Inquisition, separation of powers. What? Like, yeah, it'd be interesting, but I can imagine that a lot of people would lose out.
This is why, and again, this is probably before your time, that after the Fitzgerald inquiry found all the corruption, they had to set up an independent prosecutor's office to prosecute them, because they couldn't use any of the evidence that was compelled at the Fitzgerald inquiry. So they could compel all the corrupt people to say what they'd done, but that itself couldn't be used as evidence in the later trial. And a lot of people said, "Oh, well, that's ridiculous. They've already admitted to doing all these things. How come they, when that they now get prosecuted, they're able to say, I have the right to, be presumed innocent and everything else?" And it was like, well, it's because these powers the commissions have are basically an inquisition. They don't have constraints on them. And sometimes it's overkill too. There was a big commission into why there was so much sewage on the beach in Bondi. And basically everyone lawyered up. And they never found out much of anything that went on because everyone had lawyers representing them. Because everyone was afraid they were going to get individually prosecuted for something. Yeah, I mean, we get that. I guess the point that we were making about these commissions is that they can also be just a way to fob off issues and to fob off actually taking action till later on. And I know between my colleagues and between talking to students, if this rise in sort of sexual assault is as worrying as the reports seem to be, surely some of us should have heard something in terms of action being taken rather than just some slides at O Week. The frustrations of working in public organizations. At least CEOs of corporations might be worried their corporation's going to get fined and that they might be individually liable for failing to take action for negligence or something.
Yeah, I mean, well, I can only talk for Cairns campus, but the way it's sort of set up and where it's located and that sort of stuff and where it'll move to if that new building goes ahead. Like the problem is probably going to be with people that are not students assaulting students as well. So how do you and that's because I know the city and I know the people that I walked past to go to and from here this morning. Like how is something like a commission meant to hold the responsibility of the public upon these students? Like, don't get me wrong, there'd have to be duties of care and that sort of stuff and minimizing risk. But yeah, it does seem really interesting that there was so much stuff. It's largely forgotten by me. But yeah, you don't hear much more about it, I guess. Even from like a peer level, there's not sort of too much going on. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and this is the challenge of implementing any change. So, back to the topic we're talking about today in terms of, getting a better fire safety, fire security plan into place before something terrible happens, rather than waiting for something terrible to happen. And the same thing for, post-COVID. What have we done in terms of biosecurity post-COVID? When epidemiologists say it's going to be every 5 years, we're going to have a pretty large global pandemic, we were due for one last year. How is our capacity to handle on this kind of bureaucratic level the next COVID that comes along? So on one extent, this is all very depressing. But on the other extent, this is why this area of skills are so important, is so vital, because there is a real undersupply of strategic thinking and strategic management in the public sector. And this is what this whole subject is about getting people out there who have some skills, who are able to try and take control of these situations and plan for better things. That's you
I'm
guys.
such a cynic, but I'm like, yeah, we're the new generation, yada yada, and like everyone has a go at the new generation when they come into like being budding professionals. It's like a rite of passage, right? And you talk about things like power and all of that sort of stuff. I'm like, how on earth does Scott Beattie think that, little old Carly's gonna be able to make a change somewhere? When talking about undersupplies of strategic thinking and management, the being able to get something done and just getting it done, like you're talking about in a previous week when you're a smaller entity and having that flexibility is a lot easier. But when you start talking about sort of big government, oh, that sounded a bit conspiracy theory, but like
Deep
like your
state.
big sort of institutions, like it's like, damn, like how many of us are you going to have in there as like little sleeper agents to actually make change? Because I don't know about anyone else here listening to me yap on, but people who have the good intentions and are idealistic and want to make changes don't hack it in these places. You know, like it's just a recipe for burnout, probably trying to act within your values and want to create genuine good change. And either you burn out or you become one of the existing things that are already there, looking after their paycheck, I guess, and their families and immediate circles. So
I
such a cynic, I know, but like,
I
ah,
understand.
it's
I
on my
understand.
mind.
I understand completely. Um, it's the Gen X. I'm a Gen Xer, and it's a very much the Gen Xer perspective on things. The when will the baby boomers let go and actually let the Gen Xers take over? And now we're all in our 50s, and the baby boomers are all coming out of retirement to come and take their jobs back.
And I'm an elder millennial going, we're just going to wipe you all off the board. Scratch that, start again.
Yeah, well, the Gen Xers are saying, "Fine, do it. We're too tired of trying to fight this." But
At
I
least
think
At least
I'm
Gen X are
raising.
open to like listening, like and that sort of stuff. I'm the crossover year. So in like American, Western, Anglospheric sort of stuff, I'm a millennial, but in every other sort of nation, I'm Gen Z. I've got the work ethic of a millennial though. I've been burnt out by baby boomer bosses. So, you know, I can remember like the original Bananas in Pajamas before it was a cartoon. And so,
that's it. That's it.
yeah, it's really interesting when you break it down to like a generational thing and that sort of stuff and how these things are sort of going to go. Because I reckon Gen X and Gen Z are where it's going to be at. I hate saying Gen Z, like I'm definitely Australian, but it rolls off the tongue so much better than Gen Z. Um, yeah, and even like the transcript, it doesn't even know what Gen Z means. So, yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. But man, I don't know how you guys did it, like made it to your 40s and 50s and just still have hope for the world.
I want to know
Like, good
where
for you
this
guys.
generational thing came from. Like, wasn't a thing when I was growing up. When did we all start naming each generation? Like, I knew the boomers. That was a
To
thing.
keep us
I knew that.
separated.
Yeah,
To keep us separated
Why?
for sure. I mean, it's been happening since, you know, people were writing on stone tablets and freaking pyramids and stuff, but like I'm pretty sure there's like something written on like before Christ, something or other talking about the new generation and how progressive they are and they're going to be the downfall of something. And it
yeah,
would have been
Aristotle.
like
It's
ancient
Aristotle.
Greece or something like that. Yeah. So, you know, everyone gets it. But I mean, what do you guys have to be threatened by from our generation? Like
I think.
social media?
I
That's
think
not
that.
us. That's
I think the
corporations.
question. I think the question is more about entrenched forms of power versus localized forms of power, and this is where I think COVID is an excellent example of, like, everyone looks at, state premiers or um, presidents or whatever for the success or failure of COVID, but the successes we had of COVID were all nameless individuals who none of us will ever know the name of, who actually were located in the right place in the right time and made the right decisions. And I think that's one of the that's actually, it's very very much an anarchist way of seeing things, but I think as I'm getting older, I'm becoming more of an anarchist, and I'm thinking that the whole power play thing of governments and leaders and things is all just smokescreen. That where things actually get done are people on the ground. Okay, Steph has to go, so let's quickly talk about the sim stuff that we need to get through. I think we've gone through pretty much everything in terms of the.
That would be good because I'm still a little bit confused and I did miss the first 15 minutes of today's meeting. If you did say something, Scott.
No, I didn't. I got straight into.
Okay.
Now,
Did I get it right last week?
yes,
Yes. I even used red. I even went to change my pen color to red and everything.
brilliant. Let me. No, I was going to try to share the screen. Stop presenting.
I was going to say, you can't share the screen if you got the whiteboard up.
Yeah. Let me go back, share the screen. I still just Oh, we got screens. I have worked on setting up the schedule. I sent around the schedule document because we used to do all of this in the like the extra Friday hour. So I know Stephanie's been in there and made some suggestions in terms of deadlines and things, which is good. And at the stage we're at now is getting in your bids for the budget for this week. So that's probably what we should have had done by Wednesday. I think I've got the welfare one, but I'm not sure if I've got the others.
I sent you mine, but then we had a big conversation, so it might have got lost.
Yeah.
I'm
so
advocacy,
Mine's hella
by the way.
early.
send them to me again because they might have just gotten lost on the chat.
I haven't sent anything. So what are we trying to do this week? Like to decide how much we bid?
Yeah.
Do we-
And then as soon as I get that, and we can do it now really because we're all
Yeah, okay, let's see it. Yep.
cool.
So what are we going to be doing this week that we know what to bid on? Like how much to bid?
You'll be buying stuff for your
Okay.
it's the same thing each week.
Yep.
Exactly the same.
So we're buying stuff for all those buildings and shit stuff we set up.
Yes.
Our youth detention centre and everything that I did those places.
Yeah, all those places were just basically colour, and they were a way for me to set up the stats for the town, which I can explain later.
Yeah. Okay.
But you know the town now has a series of different stats. They were all based on those places that you chose to add to the town.
Okay.
So I just need the enforcement and admin. If Carly,
Admin's already been done.
yeah, can you just message me again or something? And
I just direct messaged you as well.
okay,
It's out of 4, isn't it?
it's plus 3.
3.
Plus-
Yeah.
Plus 3 to minus 3.
Yep. Okay. Do you want me to private?
Whoever put in the day recommendations with the purple, good. That's I didn't realize that we were meant to give feedback on that, but I remember looking
You
at
don't
it and
have to.
thinking it was exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I was waiting for Scott to put days in and he didn't. And because I've been on campus all week working on an assessment, I was like, I'll just put this in. This is what we usually do.
yeah. No, I'm very grateful for you for doing that. And I can sort them out a little bit later. And I've just put a little thing so that I can tick things off each week as they go when things are done. That'll be a good tool for me. I mean, you can all look at it. It'll be a good tool for me to go, yep, we've done that. So I still haven't got your message, Carly.
Yeah, I'll do it. Hang on.
Did you message on
You never
Teams or
realised
somewhere else?
I did message on Teams, ages ago, and then I did a private message to Scott just then. But if I go exit full screen, I'm so spoiled having my 2 screens at home and I have to go back to one. It trips me up a little bit.
And I'll send you mine.
I'll put it in Teams as well.
And I'll send you mine because I won't say it out loud because that was Carly's strategic plan last week to.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
You just send me a
A
chat.
strategic plan that didn't work.
Oh, hang on. I've got it. So Carly, I've got Carly's bid for.
I'll do your private one now. I'll send you a private chat now.
Yeah. And then I will have the order sorted out.
So Michaela's welfare and Robin's enforcement.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Okay.
But don't piss me off because I'm enforcement.
Ha 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 ha. Well, what are you gonna do when I don't give you any money or support, huh? This librarian is going off.
I'm going to plan evidence.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
I have way too much say. I have way too much say. Have you seen the initials of my organization? I've got it out for you guys in enforcement. God damn.
Okay. Action order. First admin.
Yes. Carly underbid everybody.
Admin.
Yep. And now I'm gonna rip you all off. No, I'm kidding.
We have to work together this week, Carly. You better be nice.
But because
Do we now?
because Carly bid lower, like she only gets to not have as much in the locations, isn't she? Because
He doesn't
Yeah.
have as much budget.
yeah, to pick in
I-
this
yeah.
location stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. You
I
still
literally bid low so that I don't have to wait for you guys again. Because as much as like I love working as a team, I will
Yeah.
forget if I don't do it right as I'm thinking about it. So I was like, while we're learning the basics, I'm gonna undercut myself.
So now you take turns in putting your 2 workers in those slots where you want to put them, and deciding on if any of those upgrades you want to buy.
And how do I know how much I got to buy?
It'll be on your playbook.
Okay.
I've,
Rightio.
I've updated those for everything
Yeah.
except for budget, and I can do that right now.
Okay.
Except you're sharing the screen, Scott, so we can all
Oh!
see.
Oh dear. Let's stop sharing the screen. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. So I'll add the budget to advocacy.
Technically, we just had a whistleblower, guys. Administration's after him. Come on, enforcement. You can help me with this one. Let's get him.
But I do have a question with this week's stuff before I run.
Yep.
The city improvement locations. You're talking about 3 workers. Where do I get a 3rd worker? Or is this where we have the alliances and that's the 3rd worker?
You will get another worker at week 4, I think, of the sim. You'll get more as time goes on.
Okay.
But you can also collaborate. So those things that require 3 workers, you could get workers from, 1 from each team or whatever.
Awesome. And these open locations, is that this week or is that another week?
Let me have a look. Those are available anytime, but they tend to be things that are more useful later on when you've got more workers.
Okay, and we just sort of highlight which ones we want?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So any of those 3 things, location, city improvement, and open locations.
Can you put it back up on the screen? Will that give it away if you put that page up what you're talking about?
No, it
Is that what
won't.
you're talking about?
I'm on it now.
It's the town hall.
Yeah. So you can put workers in here. You can put workers in here, and you can put workers in here. So
Have we got 3 places to choose from this time?
No.
Oh, I'm confused. So.
yeah, the open locations and the city improvement locations are generally for much later in the game when you've got spare workers and you've want to do things like improve the town. At this point, you're probably going to want to buy stats so you can buy upgrades.
So just in the locations part, like putting my bid amount of people in one of those locations.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So once we've got that done, I've updated the everyone's external resources as well. And again, we'll take it in the same order where we've got new hotspots down here. And these ones are requiring larger numbers of assets, I think.
Yes, which I was looking, because it's only the 2nd week, I only have enough assets for 1 hotspot. So as we go along, we will increase assets in different groups.
Yep.
Increase the number of the different assets that we have, and then we can just pick from
Yeah.
that.
There are upgrades that'll let you get different assets to your core ones.
Yeah.
You can also trade with other people. And the advocacy group has like 3 floating assets they can contribute to anyone else's hotspot. That's
Awesome.
one of your special powers.
I am going to have to leave it there. I've got to go and get my children.
Fair enough.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your participation today, and thanks for helping out with the timetable.
No worries.
How come advocacy has special powers?
You all have
Because I'm special.
enforcement special powers. Is you can look at one of the secret information on one of the hotspots and find out what the outcomes are.
In your playbook, Robin, if you read
Have a
down
look. Oh,
somewhere in there, it'll tell you what your special
Okay.
powers are.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to have another look at it. I've just had it.
Damn, I thought I had the coolest one. You guys
Because of
are
town planning.
yeah.
There's
Damn
also a little anti-corruption game for the enforcement one where you can try and guess where the corrupt person is each week, and you get bonus points if you can guess.
Okay, I'm gonna go.
Yep. If you guess which organization has the corrupt person in it, you get some bonus victory points.
Michaela and I are not snitches, so yeah, I mean that would work really well if there was more people in the teams. That would be really cool.
Yeah, at the moment the game is just random. It's just whether you've guessed the right one. But in the full version of this, there's actually a fifth team, which is the trader team, which has one person on every team who's working to undermine everyone. But we don't have much.
Oh, lovely. Sounds like the local state government run stuff here. I didn't say that on a
Sounds
recorded
like we
session, did I?
all. I feel like we can all just link up and try to self-sabotage ourselves. Be that 50. Like, I want to see us all go into this complete and utter meltdown of just debating with ourselves. Like, we've thrown this out now. We're going to all join together on Team 5 and just be like, all right, let's do this to completely screw ourselves over and
Yeah.
make it interesting.
Yes. When you only got 4 people, it would be very hard to to run that. And the whole point is that no one knows the traders exist until things happen later in the game. So only the traders know that there's a fifth team. So it's an interesting mini game, but you need more peoples. And the enforcement team has powers to try and investigate and root out the people from Team 5. Yeah. We're just going to replace it with a guessing game this time around.
Oh, damn. Oh, hey, Rachel.
We're just wrapping up the sim for this week.
Oh, that's okay. Do you want me to come
No,
back in later? I'm just here
No,
for
I'm not.
guys' meeting.
we need to be wrapping up this meeting now. I need to stop sharing and stop recording.